Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 FAC Member Training. I'm Beverly Schwartz, the Grants Co-Chair for Impact 100 Philadelphia. Later this evening, you will also be hearing from Renee Applegate, my co-chair for grants, and Denise Rainier. Denise co-chairs the Financial Review Panel with Barbara Renninger. Just a few housekeeping notes before we dive into the substance of our presentation. We'd love to see you tonight. If your video is off, but you're willing to turn it on, please do so. And so that focus area leaders can recognize you and you can recognize other focus area members, if you haven't already changed your identification to your name, please do that now. All attendees will be muted by the host. If you have comments or questions, please type them into the chat, which will be monitored by Marcia Pellberg, who is both an FAC team leader and a member of our grants committee. At the end of our presentation, you will have another opportunity to ask questions. Since some members are unable to attend tonight, we're recording this presentation and making the recording as well as a copy of the slides available to everyone. So don't worry about missing important information. Sit back, relax, and we'll begin. We have about 60 new members this year. For many of you, this may be your first Impact 100 program. So we want to start with a brief overview of our organization. We'll continue with the key features of our grant-making model, introduce the stages of our Focus Area Committee, FAC process, and alert you to our calendar and important dates. Tonight's presentation is designed to provide you with all of the tools necessary to effectively evaluate the full proposals you will be reviewing. During the first week of February, you will meet with your FAC chair to review a mock proposal. This will give you an opportunity to practice using all the principles that you learned tonight. The exact date and time of the mock proposal session can be found in the welcome letter you received from your FAC chair. The mock proposal, as well as the Zoom link, will be sent to you later this week. Please review the mock proposal thoroughly in preparation for that session. Impact 100 Philadelphia was founded in April 2008. Our model was closely based on the original Impact 100 organization, which was founded in Cincinnati in 2001. Our mission is to engage women in philanthropy, collectively fund high-impact grants that address unmet needs in the Philadelphia region, and raise the profile of smaller nonprofit organizations. Through this work, our goal is to make the community more just, equitable, and healthy for everyone. When you join Impact, you make the commitment to be a member for 1 year. Your donation is pooled with the donations of other members into high-impact grants to support nonprofits doing important work in our region. As members, you have the opportunity to learn about small nonprofits in our region and the issues they seek to address. The most effective way to learn about our local nonprofits is by participating on a focus area committee, or FAC. That said, no member is required to participate on a focus area committee or take part in any Impact 100 programming. You may choose to be quiet investors, or you may choose to be active volunteers. We need and value both. So what is Impact 100 and what have we accomplished together? We are an organization of women that collectively pools their contributions to make high impact grants to benefit our communities. Who are our members? We are women from all over the greater Philadelphia region, as well as some from other parts of the state or other states entirely. Our ages span 6 decades. We have a variety of careers, are stay-at-home moms, are self-employed, entrepreneurs, and retirees from a wide range of occupations. We represent a mosaic of backgrounds, broad concerns, and interests. What ties us together is the desire to leverage our charitable contributions to provide substantial grants to local organizations that will have a real and lasting impact on our communities. In our first grant year, which was 2008-2009, we had 111 members. This year, that number has grown to 430 members. Since our founding, our members have awarded more than $3.6 million in grants to 55 nonprofit organizations, including 28 high-impact $100,000 grants. In June, we will be awarding 3 core mission grants of $100,000 and 2 operating grants of $50,000. Over the last several years, we've sought to increase the representation of younger members through our Young Philanthropists and Founders Fellows programs. Women who are 35 and younger may join as Young Philanthropists for 50% of the fee paid by older members. They're fully participating and voting members. Some of our events and gatherings virtually this year focus specifically on our younger members. The Founders Fellows is a separate program that offers memberships to young women who are selected each year through a competitive interview process. Young Philanthropists and Founders Fellows bring a valued and valuable perspective to our organization. It's our hope they will continue to pursue philanthropy as part of Impact 100 and separately. You can see from this slide how our grants process evolves. We are now in the 6th stage of this process. The process begins with members like you joining and making your contributions. Membership closes on December 1st and determines the size of our grant pool total and the grants amounts for this year. In the fall, at the same time we're reaching out to potential members, we also reach out to nonprofits who might be interested in applying for our grant. We do this in several ways. We hold a grant applicant information session open to potential applicants. We place listings in the United Way and other e-newsletters. We email contacts in our nonprofit database. In addition, previous applicants and grantees spread the word and members reach out to organizations they know. For our applicants, their first step in the process is to choose one of our 5 focus areas: arts and culture, education, environment, family, and health and wellness, that they feel reflect their mission. Then they submit a letter of inquiry, which is a short form of our grant application, to the focus area they've chosen. The letter of inquiry is often referred to as an LOI. These LOI submissions are completed in December. Earlier this month, experienced members working in LOI committees for each focus area reviewed these letters of inquiry, applied the principles you'll learn tonight, and determined which LOI applicants would be invited to move forward in our process and submit a full proposal. Those applicants are now in the process of completing and submitting their full proposals. Now, at the end of January, members of the focus area committees, which are you guys, will prepare to review the full proposal submitted to their focus area. The focus area committee is led by a focus area chair, and it's divided into teams of 10 to 12 women. Each team operates under the guidance of their team leader and will review full proposals and conduct site visits. Each team selects a finalist, and in May, all of the teams in the focus area will come together, present their team finalists, and narrow the choice for the entire focus area committee to one focus area finalist. This year, as I stated earlier, we will be awarding 3 $100,000 grants and 2 $50,000 grants to our focus area finalists. Every Impact 100 member will receive information about each focus area finalist and vote to determine the grant amounts before our annual meeting in June. Because we are awarding 5 grants, each focus area finalist will receive a grant. When you sit down to review these proposals, what should you consider? We do have some specific requirements and priorities for our grant applicants, but in general, we are looking to fund organizations that do important work and do it well, where our grant can strengthen the organization and have a high impact on the population served in its community. Once we identify the particular needs the organization seeks to address, we'll consider its effectiveness in addressing these issues. How well is it managing its finances? How well does it execute its mission and serve its constituents? How many people benefit from the services offered by this organization? Can our grant move the organization and its mission forward? One of our most influential considerations is why now? Why will our $100,000 grant propel an organization forward at this time? What is happening now that additional funding of $100,000 will impact and make a difference significantly for the people and community served by this organization? We're much less interested in the details of how an organization plans to spend the money. They're welcome to share that information with us on the application, but they're not required to do so. Remember, all of our applicants are actually applying for the $100,000 grant. And since you don't know which organizations will receive that grant and which of our finalists will receive $50,000, when you review the full proposal, you need to consider whether and how $100,000 would benefit the organization. We do have some hard and fast requirements for our grants. In order to be eligible to receive an Impact 100 core mission or operating grant, applicants must have 501c3 status, a physical base of operation in the 5-county Philadelphia region, and 3 full years of audited or independently reviewed financial statements. A partial year doesn't qualify. In addition, if an applicant received an Impact 100 Philadelphia core mission grant of $100,000 in the last 3 grant cycles, they are ineligible. However, organizations that have received an operating grant, which is up to $50,000, are eligible to receive a core mission grant as soon as the following year. We also have funding priorities, which are not like the eligibility requirements we just discussed. Our goal is to fund organizations that fulfill these priorities. So while we don't require them in an applicant, we will look for and favor applicants who reflect this vision. With regard to an organization's size, our funding sweet spot is an organization with an annual budget between $500,000 and $5 million. Generally, properly managed organizations of this size are well positioned to handle a grant of $100,000. And yet they're small enough that $100,000 can make a meaningful difference for the organization. Funding organizations whose programs or services target underserved populations is high on our priority list. The letter of inquiry and full proposal offer applicants an opportunity to describe the recipients of their services. Recently, we conducted a survey of our past grant recipients and noticed a disturbing trend. While we strongly supported organizations designed to help families, children, and teens, our grants managed to provide significantly less help to seniors. We also learned that few organizations outside of the County of Philadelphia were awarded grants by us. This was not intentional. Going forward, we hope to more carefully consider and balance the areas of underserved need which we've neglected. So when you review your proposals, think carefully about the likelihood that the community served is being overlooked. In recognition of the influence of implicit bias, we added an additional preference this year for organizations that are led by a staff and board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve. To support that, we've added questions to our LOI and full proposal that request board and leadership demographic information. In addition, we invite applicants to describe the steps they're taking to move in the direction of having leadership more reflective of the communities they serve. Even if applicants have not met their diversity goals, we understand this as a process. We do want to understand exactly what they're doing to engage in that process, however. Finally, it's no accident that we are called Impact 100. The essence of what we are trying to achieve with our grants is to have a high impact on an underserved community. That's why we ask our applicants to explain why a grant from us will be particularly significant now. We want to award a grant that will be transformative in addressing unmet needs in the community served. Because our grants are general operating grants, our applicants are free to spend them on infrastructure, salaries, programming, etc. However, we will not fund the items listed on this slide. This list is familiar to our applicants because these are common restrictions used by grant makers. There are a few FAC process changes this year. I mentioned earlier our preference to fund organizations that are led by a staff and board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve. This consideration is guided by our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the Philanthropy Network of Greater Philadelphia, and other funders and philanthropic organizations. We now recognize that it is more probable that racial and ethnic minorities are underrepresented in nonprofit leadership, and nonprofit organizations led by people of color are less likely to receive philanthropic funding than nonprofit organizations with white leadership. When we prioritize funding organizations whose leadership reflects the diversity of the populations they serve, and when we provide funding to minority-led organizations that are traditionally underserved by the philanthropic community, we're naturally expanding our long-standing goals to fund organizations that target underserved populations and raise the profile of lesser-known organizations doing valuable work. In 2017, we took a big step in the direction of trust-based funding when we moved away from project grants to core mission funding. Trust-based philanthropy is a model that recognizes the grantees, rather than funders, are best suited to determine where grant funds will have the greatest positive effect. They understand their organization, their mission, and their community much better than we do. With this in mind, we've eliminated the requirement of a detailed grant budget. This allows grantees to be more nimble decision makers and to direct funds where they're needed most and will have the greatest impact, as opposed to being locked into a grant budget prepared a year or two earlier. Although we welcome the move toward trust-based philanthropy, an unintended consequence is that since we embrace that approach, arts and education and environment have not been chosen for large grants. In light of our goals to reach neglected communities, we need to recognize this trend and consider whether our choices are being influenced by our implicit biases. Again, when you review these proposals, it's important to remember which communities have been underserved. Another change, which started during the last few months of the grants process last year, is to hold all of our meetings and site visits virtually. This decision reflected our health and safety concerns and the uncertainty surrounding COVID containment. We recognize that the lack of in-person site visits disappointed many members. However, we needed to consider the situation for our applicants, specifically their need to react very quickly to the pandemic and focus on adjusting their programs as needed to continue effectively serving their clients. We didn't think it was reasonable to impose the additional burden of a virtual site visit on them. But now that we and our applicants have had time to adjust to this new normal, we will be asking them to join us for virtual site visits this year. We expect those site visits to offer members an opportunity to hear from the organization leadership, ask questions, and get a better sense of the organization's physical space and/or programming. And now, I am pleased to turn this program over to my wonderful grants co-chair, Renee Applegate.
Thank you, Beverly. Excuse me. In the first part of the presentation, Beverly gave you an overview of our organization and our eligibility requirements and funding preferences. And in this part of the presentation, I'm going to zoom in on our calendar and describe what happens at each stage of our process and what your role as FAC members will be. As Beverly mentioned, our grant review is conducted through our 5 focus areas. When an applicant sends in their LOI to us, they must choose the focus area in which they will be evaluated. And this choice is based on how well their organization fits the following definitions. Arts and culture includes cultural programs, participation in the arts, and arts education. Education considers educational opportunities for children or adults. Environment includes organizations that focus on the improvement, preservation, revitalization, or awareness of public spaces, facilities, or natural resources. Family includes organizations that strengthen and enhance the lives of children and families, including seniors. And health and wellness seeks improvement of people's mental and/or physical well-being. These are our ground rules and expectations for members as we engage in the grants process. By now, you should have signed your conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement in which you commit to avoid conflicts of interest and maintain confidentiality. We ask that you do not share information you learn about an applicant with people who are not members of Impact 100 or even members who are outside of your committee. If you missed the conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement, there's a link in the welcome letter you received from your focus area committee chair. Know that these rules on the slide reflect our guiding values. We strive to treat our members and applicants fairly and in a transparent manner. We strive to be welcoming and inclusive, and we believe that every member's voice is valuable, and we want every member to feel comfortable expressing her views during the process. We've found that hearing a range of diverse perspectives helps us make a stronger collective decision. Our goal is a consensus decision, which does not mean that every member agrees with the outcome, but that every member knows that her voice and concerns were heard. While we move through the FAC process, we try to be respectful of your time and that of our applicants. You'll receive timely communications from your leaders about our process, upcoming meetings, your tasks and responsibilities. And in turn, we ask you for your conscientious participation. For our applicants, we provide them with updates on the process as we go along. In the coming months, it's important that you remember that each of us is acting on behalf of Impact 100, not as an individual. As a member of an FAC, you're representing the entire organization when you review proposals, conduct site visits, and select your FAC finalists. This is just a quick overview of the grants process timeline. As you've heard earlier, letters of inquiry or LOIs have already been submitted and reviewed. Our LOI committee has determined which LOI applicants they would like to move forward in the process, and they are now preparing their full proposal. Using the tools that you will learn this evening, your first task is going to be to review and evaluate those full proposals. Your team will select 2 applicants to move forward to site visit, and then between them, select a team finalist. And then ultimately in May, each FAC will select a single finalist from among the team finalists. This slide is just a little bit more detailed timeline of the FAC review. I think Beverly mentioned that each FAC is divided into 2 or 3 teams of about 10 to 12 women, and each team is going to be assigned 5 or 6 full proposals to review and evaluate. Each focus area committee and each team is going to be a mix of newer and more experienced FAC members. FAC members begin by reading the proposals assigned to their team in February. This year, that process is going to begin on February 6th, and your reading will be completed by February 21st. In March and early April, each team is going to work together to evaluate the applicants assigned to them through a discussion of the full proposals and through site visits. Based on the full proposals and the site visits, each team is going to select a single finalist. In May, each of the 5 FACs is going to meet as a full committee to select a single FAC finalist from among the team finalists. Information about these finalists will be circulated to the full membership, who will have the opportunity to rank their preferences and determine which finalists receive $100,000 and which receive $50,000. The $100,000 and $50,000 grantees will be announced shortly before the annual meeting. Then at the annual meeting in June, we will celebrate our core mission and operating grantees, and each will be invited to make a brief presentation about their organization. So during the review process, each FAC is going to meet 3 times to discuss the proposals and applicants under consideration. The first 2 meetings are going to be just team meetings, just your group of 10 to 12 women, and the 3rd meeting will include the entire focus area committee. The first team meeting will be held after you've read and rated the full proposals assigned to your team. You will discuss the proposals with the members of your team, and together you'll select the 2 organizations that you would like to move on to the next step in the process, which is the site visit. Please note that your rating of the proposals in slide room is only a starting point for the discussion at the team meeting. You may find that your view of an organization changes once you hear the perspective of other members of your team, or conversely, your views may influence your team members. All members, experienced and new, have something valuable to contribute. The next task is going to be to conduct site visits with your team selected organizations. So what exactly is a site visit? For those of you who are new to Impact, please don't worry if you can't answer that question. I knew next to nothing about grant making when I joined Impact 6 years ago and probably had never heard the term site visit. So in normal world, which I think of as the pre-pandemic world, A site visit was a physical visit to an applicant's offices or programming site to meet with leadership, observe programming if possible, and ask questions about the organization and its proposal. This year, as you know, we're going to conduct the site visits via Zoom, but we are going to do our best to give you as many of the benefits of a traditional site visit as possible. You'll have the opportunity to hear from and ask questions of leadership. If organizations have pictures and or brief videos of their programs or services, we will allow them to share those with you. But the most important thing I can say to you about site visits is this: attend your team site visits if at all possible. Site visits are consistently rated by members as their favorite part of their FAC participation. And they're extremely valuable to our process. Often an organization or program can really come to life on a site visit, or a site visit can reveal flaws that weren't apparent in the proposal. And attending both of your team site visits is even better than attending just one. It's very easy to fall in love with an organization on a site visit, but if you attend two, you'll be better positioned to make a more objective comparison between them. Because site visits are so important in evaluating our applicants, you'll be asked to provide your feedback to your site visit leader after the visit. She will compile all of the feedback into a written report that'll be shared with the rest of the team and will be used to help you determine which organization will become your team finalist and possibly your FAC finalist, but I'm a little ahead of myself. I think that's the next one. After your team has conducted its site visits, you'll reconvene at your second team meeting to select one of the organizations you site visited to be your team finalist. Your team finalist is the applicant from your team's pool that you've collectively determined best fits our funding guidelines and is best qualified to receive our $100,000 grant. Often a team will conduct site visits with two excellent organizations, and it may be difficult to determine which is the best choice for your team finalist. When the decision becomes tricky at this stage of the process, or frankly, at any stage of our process, we find it's helpful to keep our ground rules and values in mind. Share your views freely and be prepared to hear the views of your team members, which might be different from yours. And refer back to our funding preferences and grant-making goals. And finally, remember that we don't expect that every member is going to vote for the same organization to be the team finalist, but we do hope that every member is able to express her views in an open and respectful forum, and that will make the selection process open and fair. After the teams select their team finalists, each focus area committee will meet for the FAC meeting during the first week of May. At that meeting, each team will present its team finalist to all members of the FAC, and the FAC chair will lead the committee in selecting a single FAC finalist from among the team finalists. This decision, excuse me, will be based on the same funding preferences as the decisions earlier in the process, and the goal will be to select the one applicant from the entire focus area committee that best meets Impact's funding goals. This is the culmination of our FAC review process, and it will be your final duty as a member of your FAC. After all focus area committees have had their meetings and selected their finalists, you and every other Impact 100 member will receive information about all 5 of the FAC finalists. You'll have the opportunity to vote on the finalists. In this case, your vote will be a ranking of the 5 finalists in order of preference. This ranked vote by the entire membership will determine the grant amounts for the finalists, with the top 3 each receiving a grant of $100,000 and the other 2 finalists receiving a grant of $50,000. So the $100,000 grant and smaller operating grants have been part of the Impact model since its founding. And until this year, the only grants we made were to those organizations that applied to one of our 5 FACs. But times change, and we're very excited to be piloting a new program, the Community Awards, this year. The Community Awards program will make small grant awards ranging in value between $5,000 and $25,000. This year, we have a $20,000 pool for the Community Awards program, and we'll be making one $10,000 award and 2 $5,000 awards. The goals and process of the Community Awards are a bit different from the FAC process. Community awards will be given to organizations that are performing outstanding and critical work, but are not receiving significant funding from other funders. We are hopeful that the Community Awards program will enable us to extend our funding to a larger number of organizations, which has long been a goal of our members. That it will allow us to expand our funding to a more diverse group of nonprofit organizations, Because the awards are smaller, we are hopeful that we'll be able to fund smaller or more emerging organizations that may not be a good fit for our $100,000 grant. We hope that it will allow us to be as inclusive of the nonprofit community as possible, and that it will allow us to focus on emerging and or local critical needs. Unlike our core mission and operating grants, organizations cannot apply for the community award. Instead, our community awards committee, with input from the membership as a whole, will identify urgent critical needs in our region that they would like to fund, as well as organizations that are working to address these needs. And at the same time that you are reviewing your full proposals, conducting site visits, and ultimately selecting FAC finalists, the Community Awards Committee will be conducting research on the identified organizations and selecting 3 community award finalists. And just like for the FAC finalists, the award amounts for the community award finalists will be determined by a ranking vote by the entire membership. Because members of the Community Awards Committee need a certification in our grant-making principles to identify and evaluate potential award recipients, at least 2 years of FAC experience is a requirement to serve on that committee. And if you want to learn more about it, there is an FAQ on the Impact100 Philadelphia website. So as I mentioned, we are very excited about the community awards. We wanted to give you a little bit of context since you will be hearing more about it. But the main purpose for being here is to provide you with information about the FAC process that you will be participating in. So to that end, I'm going to turn the next few slides over to Denise Rainier, who along with her co-chair, Barbara Renninger, runs our financial review panel. The financial review panel serves a critical role in supporting all of you as you evaluate proposals and select your team and FAC finalists.
Thank you, Renee. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. The financial review panel, which is otherwise referred to as the FRP, is a group of members with expertise in financial matters. So they're members of the focus area committees who are going to review the applicants using the same criteria that were just mentioned tonight and the funding priorities that we all use. But they will also conduct a more thorough financial due diligence on our applicants, and then advise you, the FAC members, about the financial stability of the applicants. So we're pleased to report that this year, each team will have its own dedicated FRP member who will attend meetings and be available to answer questions about the team's full proposal. As our FRP members review the applicant's financial information, they're looking for some specific things. They're trying to evaluate each applicant's financial strength, their long-term viability, and their ability to handle that $100,000 grant. At the same time, they're highlighting red flags that suggest that there might be a financial weakness or an area of concern with a particular applicant. At times, the information that's presented with the full proposal isn't really sufficient for the FRP member to make a recommendation about an applicant. In that case, she may reach out to the applicants and clarify the information provided, confirm some of what they see, and just have a little feedback with the applicant. For applicants who advance to the site visit stage of the process, the FRP will then conduct a financial due diligence call with that applicant. So throughout the process, our FRP members are reporting their findings to all of you, the FAC members, so you can make a more informed decision. This slide sets forth a few case studies of the types of issues that we may come across. Note that these are hypothetical applicants that have been crafted to represent the issues that we've seen. So these aren't all in one applicant necessarily, but they're sort of a composite. Agency number 1 is a 3-year-old agency serving migrant children and families. It has a diversified list of donors and revenue sources, which we would consider a plus. The application states that the agency has 3 years of financial statements, but then the agency was not able to provide 3 years of audited or reviewed financial statements. Because the 3 years of audited or reviewed financial statements is one of our hard and fast eligibility requirements, this agency would be deemed ineligible for the grant. If this issue comes to light early enough, your FRP rep would notify your team leader right away so that she could let the team members know, and you wouldn't have a reason to read the full proposal. We try to identify organizations that are ineligible as early in the process as possible. Sometimes we come across an organization that advances to the full proposal stage that doesn't meet the eligibility requirements. Usually that's because in the LOI stage, we just asked whether or not they could supply the required financial statements. And if the applicant said yes, we took their word for it. And then when it happened, we had to then come through and make a different decision. This can sometimes be frustrating for members who've become excited about an applicant, but it could be unavoidable. So we'll keep an eye out for those situations and let you know as soon as possible. Agency number 2 is a well-established affordable housing provider. From a financial perspective, its assets have been deteriorating and they've been running a budget deficit for quite some time, and it looks like that's likely to continue. In addition to these financial concerns, their executive director, who played a role in the agency's success, is nearing retirement age, and the agency doesn't have a clear succession plan for him. Also, the founder and executive director has never taken a salary. The finance director recently turned over. These things are areas of concern. And then to add to that, the organization has an indirect relationship with a religious organization. So when you take all of these factors together, none of them is strictly disqualifying, but they give us pause. So since they paint a picture of an organization that's in a pretty unstable position with the risk of some pretty big bumps ahead, we would let you know that's what we're observing. Now, that said, if the members of the team think that the organization's programs are strong and they believe that they really we could have an impact on them with our grant, the team members may decide to move them to a site visit, taking all of those factors into account. The FRP would then continue to explore the issues through the next level of financial due diligence in that due diligence call with the organization and further review. Agency number 3 is an after-school program that is a local arm of a national organization. The organization has a stable operating history, which we like, but the local organization doesn't exercise control over the funds. The funds are not segregated. The local funds are not segregated from the national funds. And so that's a concern. And for this reason, agency number 3 is ineligible. While we do accept applications from local chapters of national organizations, we also need to make sure that our funds are spent locally. So if there's a chance that our funds could go back up to the national organization and be redistributed someplace else, we cannot be sure that our funds would stay within the 5-county region as we require. Number 4 provides English language services to non-English speakers. Agency number 4 receives most of its funding from 1 or 2 donors, and the grants from those donors have been declining. As a result, the organization has experienced 3 years of operating deficits. A conversation with the organization confirmed that they expect their key donor to continue to reduce its contributions, and as a result, the agency is looking to develop a brand new donor base. Impact100's funds would be used for marketing and fundraising. This set of facts is worrying and suggests that the organization's financial position is likely to deteriorate further before it potentially goes back up. We would want to dig deeper into these issues and would make a recommendation to the team members based on what our findings suggest. The members of the financial review panel really are looking forward to working with you during this grant process. We want to remind you that all members are welcome to review the financial information. Just because the financial review panel members are reviewing this information and considering these issues doesn't mean that you're not welcome to also review it and ask questions and probe and move forward with your decision based on what you see independently. We try to make all aspects of our process, even the financial review process, collaborative. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Renee.
Thanks, Denise. We really value the work of our financial review panel. And for those of you who are new, you're going to see why when you start the process. Their expertise and thorough review really help support us to direct our funding to organizations that are positioned to make good use of it. So now that you've had the chance to learn a bit about our process and our standards for evaluating grants, I know you're eager to get started, and we are too. Our full proposal applicants are currently working on their applications, and you can begin reading them on Saturday, February 6th. By February 3rd, you should receive a welcome letter from your team leader. You should have already received a welcome letter from your FAC chair that lets you know which FAC you are on. If you haven't received that, check your spam folder. And also, if you don't see it there, shoot me an email at the grants email. I believe this came up as a question that someone had. But next week, you will get a welcome letter from your team leader that will let you know which team on the FAC you're on. And the letter is also going to include the list of full proposals assigned to your team, along with other documents that will help guide you through the review process. If you're new to Impact or to the FAC process, you will also receive an email from Slide Room inviting you to create an account. Slide Room is our online application management tool that we've used for the past several years. The welcome letter you receive from your team leader will include a Slide Room user guide, which will include all of the information you need to access and review the proposals in Slide Room. But even without the user guide, it's pretty intuitive and pretty simple. But if you have any difficulties at all with Slide Room, please reach out to your team leader for assistance. Just a couple of quick notes. You won't be able to log into Slide Room if you are a new FAC member, or access your full proposals if you're a returning FAC member, until you complete your conflict of interest form. Again, a link to that form was included in the welcome letter you should have received from your FAC chair. Also, if you log into Slide Room before the reading period starts, you may only see a couple of applications, or you might not see any at all. Our deadline for our applicants is February 4th. And in our experience, a lot of them submit their proposals in the last day or two before the deadline. In addition to the Slide Room user guide, your team leader is going to send you all of the other documents that will be useful to you as you review and rate your full proposals. These include a copy of our eligibility criteria and funding priorities, our definitions of our focus area, an evaluation tip sheet, and a proposal evaluation worksheet that many members like to use to help keep track of their thoughts as they review full proposals. The evaluation tip sheet can help you focus on some of the most important questions you should ask about each proposal. The slide lists some of those considerations. As we've mentioned, your individual evaluation of an applicant is really just the starting point for our grant making. The real decisions are made in your team meetings and in your FAC meeting. Please keep in mind again that you're representing all members of Impact when you review the proposals, and should apply the Impact grant making criteria to that task. That said, proposal evaluation is both a science and an art. Whether an organization meets our eligibility criteria is usually a black and white question, but how well it satisfies our funding priorities is a lot more gray. And it's the topic that you can expect to spend the most time discussing with your team members and other committee members. For example, one of our priorities is to fund organizations that will have a high impact on their beneficiaries and communities, but we specifically don't define impact. Some members feel strongly that organizations that serve fewer people, but do so in a more intensive way, have a greater impact than organizations that have a broader but shallower reach. Other members take the opposite view. So that question and many others are the ones that you will consider as you and your colleagues move through the process. You should also know that you're not limited to the full proposal. We think of it as the starting point in evaluating an applicant. In most cases, it's pretty easy to find additional information about local organizations. Most of them have websites. You can consult GuideStar, do a Google search of news articles. You can often find out a lot more about an organization's programs, staff, and successes. And we encourage you to do that. The additional information you find from these other resources can really help give you a more complete picture of the organization and a better foundation for determining how well it fits our grant making goals. So I know we've given you a lot of information. Before we turn to questions, which I promise we will do, just a quick recap of what the next steps are. So next week, you have a mock proposal review with your FAC chair. Later this week, you'll receive an email from her with the mock proposal to review and the Zoom link for the training. This is really valuable. It kind of gives you a dry run in looking at a proposal and figuring out how to spot issues. Starting on February 6th, you'll be able to start reviewing and rating real full proposals in Slide Room. And then you're sort of off. It's on to meetings and site visits and ultimately selecting one finalist to represent your FAC. And then for the end of our grant cycle, following the FAC meetings and before the annual meeting on June 7th, you'll be able to, along with all of the other members of Impact, vote on the FAC finalists and the community award nominees. And we will all join together again at our annual meeting on June 7th to celebrate our 2021 grantees. And I know, as I said before, we've covered a lot of information. I know some people have questions. Marsha Pelberg, who's one of our FAC team leaders and a member of our grants planning committee, has been monitoring your questions in the chat, and she may have answered some of them already. She's now going to also pose some questions to the presenters. So if you have a question that you haven't asked, please feel free to put it in the chat.
And while we're waiting, perhaps what you can do, Renee, is to verify that our website is a great location for folks to get information. In fact, one of our listeners wanted to know about where she could find out about the eligibility and ineligibility information we provided. And in addition to getting the slides that you saw tonight, you'll also be able to go to the website and find out specifically what both our members and our grantees get to see. And that's part of Impact's transparency, that we made this information available so folks applying for a grant, organizations applying for a grant, as well as you, know what our requirements are.
Yes, and that will also be included in the letter you received, the email you received from your team leader. So there's multiple locations where you will be able to access that.
So I saw a question from somebody about whether do all organizations that are offered a chance to submit a full proposal do so? And the answer to that is no, because sometimes they feel they can't meet our eligibility requirements. And so, or maybe they feel this is not a good year where they would meet our priorities. They get all of the information about what we're looking for from us because it's public and it's on our website. I hope that answers the question.
Most of them do. It's rare that they don't. Most of them do, but it's not a not a guarantee.
We had a question about how long it takes when somebody has finished their the paperwork required that they fill out about conflict of interest, the COI. I didn't want to use too many acronyms in one sentence, but how long does it take for once it's submitted for an individual actually to get access to Slide Room?
So if they're a new user, I don't think we've entered any new users in Slide Room yet because the proposals aren't available yet. But be on the lookout next week if you're new to Slide Room and you haven't heard from them. We will be putting new folks in next week so that they're ready to go when the proposals are available on February 6th.
We did have a question that Mary Broach was able to answer, and that had to do with the community awards, about whether or not there's public knowledge of them yet. And Mary, you gave a great answer. I just was wondering, folks may not have been able to see it in the chats because we got a lot of questions, but maybe you could chime in if you're still on the call.
Yes, I am still here. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just the answer is that Community Awards is public. We've been announcing it in newsletters, I think, since about the middle of the fall. And we're very excited. It is a pilot program, so we'll see how it goes. But we're looking just to fund organizations that might not typically be on our radar for impact, but especially might not be getting significant funds from other funders. So we're looking to just really spread our grant funding around. And as I said in another note in the chat, we're at $420,000 because of all of you on the call and the 431 members we have this year. So it's just so fantastic. But we're looking forward to it, and we'll definitely be passing out information every month in your member letter about community awards. So please stay tuned.
Oh, wow. How many LOIs did we go through? 200?
We got 221 LOIs this
Right.
year, and we invited 76 organizations to submit full proposals. It was a very big LOI year.
Sure was.
Did we miss anything, Marcia? Or are we?
It looks like we got them all. That last question that just came in about the LOIs is the last one that I'm seeing here.
If
Okay.
anybody else have any other questions, you can type them in.
While we're waiting for that, I would like to add one more thought just for the benefit of the group. Obviously, what's happened over the last year has had a really strong impact on the financial position of each of these organizations. So we expect this to be a really challenging year in terms of determining when financial concerns are concerning enough to consider the organization less favorably than you would otherwise. So as you're making your own determination about that, if you ever want to reach out to your financial review panel member just to talk that over, don't hesitate to do that, because we do expect this year to be a little more challenging, just because last year the full financial impact of what was coming wasn't really evident, but this year we expect it to be pretty clear in the proposals we received.
Well, this is not your last chance to ever ask questions. Questions that come up after this or as you're reviewing proposals, you'll have a team leader, an FAC chair. You can reach out to either Beverly or myself. We're always happy to answer them.
And we hope you really enjoy this process and learn a lot, because it's a wonderful organization and we're glad you're all a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. So just a couple of final reminders. As Beverly said, thanks for joining us. Be on the lookout for an email from your FAC chair with the mock proposal training and a welcome letter from your team leader that will include the list of full proposals. We have a really exciting program coming up on February 9th on DEI and structural racism. There is more information on the events page of our website. And as I said, feel free to reach out to grants co-chairs, your FAC chair, your team leaders with additional questions. We're always happy to answer them. And thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.